Today, Nintendo shipped out more than 1 million cartridges of its newest video game called Star Fox, designed to give the player the feeling of piloting a supersonic speed aircraft with three-dimensional graphics and blazing game speed. The cost $59.95. Nintendo locked in a fierce battle with Sega in the video game field. And analysts say Sega got the upper hand 2 years ago by offering more complex and realistic game action. So, battle goes on, John.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Bion and Dylan Cuthbert, and we are going to play Star Fox today, which I don't know, it's a pretty independent game. It's got animals in it. I don't know if anyone's heard about it, but I think it's got some kind of fan base going on. Yeah. So, yeah. All right, let's get going. We have just played a little bit of X, which was your first game with Nintendo on the Game Boy, which it was super impressive because it is pretty much a very similar game to this on much more modest hardware.
Yeah, a bit more hardcore perhaps.
Yeah. A bit of reading, a little bit more imagination needed. Yeah. But then a year after that came out, you guys started making this.
Yeah. Actually, well, a year after that came out, this came out, so we'd already started working on this.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so like we just rolled right into it. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, kind of overlapped it by a few months actually.
And you talked a little bit about how you became involved in Nintendo with was it Argonaut?
Yes. Yeah.
And then they were impressed with your 3D work on there, and then you made X for them, which fed naturally into this. Can you talk a little bit about your experience getting like rolled onto this project and so what they pitched to you?
Yeah. So initially, I'd finished up X, and the FX chip project was coming to the point where they had prototypes, and so they started needing a game for it. And initially, we started building a game called SNES Glider, which is kind of going to be like a Star Glider, like the Argonaut IP, but for the SNES, but on this FX chip. And then Nintendo were like, well, that's not our IP. So they said, well, it's not going to be SNES Glider. So Miyamoto went away and had to think about things. And there's, it was over the New Year period. And in the New Year in Japan, people go and do Hatsumode, which is you go to a shrine and you just kind of like, throw some money in a well and make a wish, that kind of thing. And everybody does it in New Year, so it's like a little sort of traditional thing. And he went to the shrine near where Nintendo was at the time, and near where he lived, which is called the Fushimi Inari Shrine. It's like the most visited shrine in Japan. Okay. And it's this shrine where there are thousands and thousands of gates leading up into, like orange gates leading up into the mountain. And you can see here you've got these gates, right? Yeah. And so he imagined, as he was walking through these gates, he imagined what it'd be like just to fly through them, like in the ship, and what the 3D experience you'd get from that. And then he came back, after New Year, and we came back. We were also in England during that time, and then we came back after, like almost immediately after New Year, and he comes to us and says, "I know what the game's going to be now, and it's going to be a game where you fly through gates in 3D and shoot at things." And that's what it became. And the Fushimi Inari Shrine is a fox shrine. So it all links in. So that is the Star Fox Shrine. So if you ever go to Kyoto, you should go and visit it if you like Star Fox.
You can see the shrine that inspired all the gameplay.
Basically, yeah.
If you go in there, you totally get it.
Yeah. If you look it up on the net, you can see.
You'll just naturally wonder what it'll be like to fly through all of those.
Yeah, you do. It's really fun actually to walk up through all these gates, just thousands of them. So
not as good as I think.
And that's basically how it became what it is now. It wasn't at that point. It wasn't called like Star Fox. But a few months later, Miyamoto-san came up with the characters and worked with Miyamoto-san and came up with the name a bit later. Okay.
And you were telling me when we were playing X, like the team for that was pretty small. It was you,
just a director and like an assistant artist, I suppose, and the music guys, of course.
So like 4 or 5 people, like in the core team,
max,
pretty small.
Really, yeah.
And then how big was the team for this?
This had an FX chip team in the UK who just did the raw sort of like polygon rasterization bits, for example, just because they also developed the FX chip in itself, so they knew how to get the best performance out of the thing. And then it had 3 people, including me, from England, but actually based in Japan, working directly out of the offices at Nintendo.
Okay.
And then there was a director who ended up going on to be the director of Wave Race 64 and what's the other one? Animal Crossing. So Eguchi, his name's Eguchi. And then there was an assistant director called Yamada, who now primarily works on I think the Zelda series.
Okay.
And then 1 3D artist, and that was about it really, apart from the music people again. So I don't know how many that is, but the core team was probably about 7 people really, the sort of day-to-day core.
Right.
And 3 programmers.
Okay. So it was a significant sort of percentage-wise scale larger, but not
ridiculously huge.
Yeah.
And we made it very fast.
Oh really? How long was the development period for this?
From the point where we got, where we were given the raw idea of the going through the gates, I'd say about 10 months.
Oh really?
Yeah, maybe 11 months. Yeah, because we all went home for Christmas and it was finished at that point. So.
How far into dev were you before they came up with the Fox idea and the whole
it was really just like very, very tentative stuff. We had had like this big giant tank on that would fire missiles, but it was all 3D. It's like a 3D all range game, and that's what Miyamoto-san didn't really like at the time. So he said, "Well, let's make it more simple for people to understand."
Right.
So there's another thing about the Nintendo aesthetic, making things a little bit more easy to understand.
Yeah. I remember from playing X, there was very much, you could roam around anywhere, you would use the compass and sort of, you would get guided by the compass.
More of an adventure type thing, yeah.
And then for this, it's completely on rails, you're going down the corridor pretty much. And that, I would assume, was very much by their direction.
Yeah. And it made it a lot easier to design the game and add the sequences that they wanted to get in there. Like, for example, I think it might be in this stage, but where you fly into spacecraft and you have like a little sort of tunnel sequence in the spacecraft, then you fly out of the spacecraft, and little things like that, which were just so much more fun and so much easier to do when it was on rails like this.
Yeah, you would know that the player would hit that location.
That's big fat lasers.
Yeah. Was it just from the director that they wanted to try out different perspectives, some in first person, some in the third person view?
Yeah, I think this one, the first person view, was primarily Miyamoto-san, and also I think we all wanted it a bit because we were all big fans of Namco's Starblade.
Okay.
And Namco's Starblade is this kind of view. So we wanted to have this view in there somewhere. I think if you push a button, I think select something, you can actually go to the outside view. I seem to remember. There you go.
Select.
There you go. You've got has a nice little transition, which is quite unique for the time.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if I ever even knew that you could switch perspectives.
Yeah, you can do that. There's lots of secrets and stuff as well everywhere.
I don't know if it's this level or not, but I think in one of these levels there's something hidden in one of the asteroids.
Yes, yeah. There's a little smiley face asteroid, or kind of a weird face asteroid. And I think there's 2 of them, and if you destroy both of them, you go to, I think, the warp zone or something.
Yeah.
You can skip stages and stuff like that. One thing, quite interesting about this game is that a lot of the game design was really just down to me and Giles just playing around with stuff, and then showing the Nintendo, like the directors, and then they would just tweak it a bit to make it a little bit more Nintendo friendly, and then make it work. So it was a really interesting, very collaborative process.
So it was like a lot of just prototyping ideas.
Yeah. We were just coming up with all kinds of stuff just on the fly to do and try out. And it just works,
Yeah.
I mean, stuff like, a lot of stuff came from just us, the programmers, being game creators, because we are, obviously game developers, game creators. And so like stuff, even just like let's say having the enemies hit flash when you hit them and stuff, that kind of thing wasn't really from the Nintendo side. That's from our side as gamers and game creators.
Right, knowing like what good feedback felt right to you.
Exactly. So we just pull this stuff in by default.
Rad, yeah.
And I think I think that was a lot of fun because we were very autonomous and just kind of went ahead doing our own thing.
Yeah.
So sometimes they'd have to reel us back a bit, saying, "Oh, this is going a bit extreme," or whatever, you know.
Yeah. No, it's always a good creative session though, is when you're throwing out all these ideas more than you could maybe use.
Exactly,
in the final
exactly.
product.
I mean, in one of the stages, there's a boss that's a jackpot machine, like a Vegas style kind of.
Oh yeah, that's one. I think one of
yeah.
the hidden levels.
Yeah. So that was basically just one of my ideas.
Oh really? You
Yeah.
you wanted to throw that
I
in there?
I just wanted to have a jackpot type machine in there.
Interesting.
Yeah, we tried to put in as many kind of those kind of Easter eggs as possible. It came from us and Nintendo, I think. We just really liked trying to hide stuff in all the stages, so it's really a collaborative effort on that side. You know, it's like they would really think of stuff. Sometimes we'd have like a little inspirational idea, and we go, "Oh, why don't we try this? This seems a pretty cool thing to try." And then they go, "Oh yeah, okay, let's make that into a whole stage," you know, stuff like that, which is pretty cool. So there's one other on the medium course. I think it's the sea stage, the water kind of world stage, and I was just playing with joining objects together with like a sort of very basic joint system. And I wanted to see if I could get them to wave around in the wind and stuff like that. And I was just playing around with it, and they because I thought, oh, we could use it on one of the stages,
right.
And they just said, oh, actually, let's make a whole stage about this, and let's make the final boss also use the same technology. And so we had the King Dodderer, sort of weird chicken boss in there, and his neck is made up of the same structure, the same sort of joined up structure.
And that's just from something that you were playing around with,
yeah.
not even knowing what it would be.
Exactly,
useful for.
and then we just collaborated and built a whole level. You have like plants coming out and stuff, you know, using the same thing. When I was making X, you know, the game before this, I had I wanted to put an Easter egg in there, like a skip function, like so you could get to the end credits really quickly. And of course, I wasn't used, because it's my first game being released from such a big publisher with a proper system in place. I wasn't used to the QA process, and so all I did was, because I thought, well, I'll just slip it in there, I won't tell anyone about it.
Right.
And they discovered it somehow. I don't know how. Like they discovered this thing, and like sent me like a really, you know, the QA, the Marrow Club at Nintendo Japan. They sent me this, you know, fax going, don't add features without telling us. Even if they are secret features, tell us what they are, because if that causes a crash or something, then of course it's permanently burned in the ROM. But when I was 18 making this game, I didn't realize. Yeah. So now I kind of, yeah, it's all right to put Easter eggs in, but they can't be just developer-only Easter eggs. They have to, the QA department also needs to know about them. The planet selection screen there, you know, with all the rotating planets, even those rotating planets were quite good technology for the time. Yeah. Because we used the FX chip to render and give them nice shading and stuff, and they come out really well.
Do you recall any other comparable 3D games that were out around this time? I know later in Super Nintendo's life there was like a racing game or something that had a chip in it.
Yeah. There's not really at this point though. Yeah, this was like the at the time this was the first like consumer level, like, you know, sort of at home 3D game that you could play with a decent frame rate. And the frame, I mean, now we look at it, the frame rate isn't that decent, but back in the day it was pretty decent, where other games were running at like, you know, 15 or 10 FPS, you know. This kept a fairly constant frame rate. It had lots of stuff on screen, lots of action, lots of lasers, and, you know, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, you have this whole star field, all of these lasers going around, the player character, the enemies, and that big background ship.
Yeah, oh, there you go, you can get in there. And remember, you can spin as well.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to ask about too, when you're talking about prototyping or just things that felt right. Like these spins, oh, I think I'm locked on.
Yeah, no, you are, yeah.
These spins always felt like, not entirely superfluous, but they always felt really satisfying.
Yeah.
And it was just something that you guys are playing around with,
that
you decided to throw in?
It's the controls, so Miyamoto was very hands-on with the controls. He would back then they still smoked in the office at Nintendo, and they'd come into our little section right at the back. We had a kind of little kind of partitioned off section because we were foreign and you know they didn't want us to be seen by anybody. But we were in this really cool little private little section in their office, and they came and so Miyamoto-san would come into the place, and it's like his little secret smoking room. Which kind
no one else would
was
ever
a
go
bit
there?
annoying.
Oh, yeah.
So he'd come in and he'd sit behind. So Giles did the controls of the ship basically, and he'd sit behind Giles and for weeks and weeks and weeks just constantly tune the controls, like really like until Giles was really sick of it. I think he was calling him names at the end of it.
Really?
Yeah. Because he'd also sit there smoking as well. So he's telling you all this stuff and smoking and and contaminating the whole area. Luckily, he stopped smoking after, I think it was like after Star Fox actually, he stopped smoking. He decided, but I wish he'd stopped before.
So was that kind of like his involvement was just really helping you guys
refine the controls, and yeah, it was the main thing. It's very much hands-on, but even now, with a lot of the games, he'll write up a whole load of comments about controls and get the teams doing better controls or solving control-related problems. And he's heavily involved in like the design of new controllers and stuff like that as well. So he really likes controls, and I think that really shows with this. I mean, a lot of it's not just a control; it's a camera movement as well. And so like your R-Wing feels very dynamic. It's kind of going all over the screen.
Yeah.
And kind of you don't feel the controls are designed in a way that you don't feel the edges too badly of the corridor that you're in.
Because like the camera kind of
covers it for you a little bit, yeah. And also it makes it so you can always see what you're shooting at as well. So a lot of work went into that. It's not as easy as it looks. So I think some of the later Star Fox games that were made outside of Nintendo and didn't have so much of Miyamoto's input, I think they lost a lot, or at least a bit of the subtlety that this original game had. It made it a bit simpler, and I always preferred these more complex controls because you really feel like you're swinging around and flying this R-Wing fighter.
Yeah. It's really impressive, not just because the game itself stands on its own, but because there was very little to kind of pull inspiration from at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
So to not only like do it first, but really nail it down in a pretty impressive way, makes the feat that much more impressive.
This part's pretty interesting. Right? It's actually a sort of a seamless transition between two different levels. So now you're in a completely different mode where even the screen mode is different for the background graphics to give you this sense of stuff flying towards you.
Oh yeah.
And then when you come out again, that's removed, and there's like a little. We cover you can see it if you look there. We cover the screen with polygons, just as we do the transition, so you can't see the background change. You'll see here
a little bit.
Here, see, so it's all polygons. And now you're going to the boss, actually.
But if I was going back outside?
If you're going back outside, yeah, it would all be good. And even actually now, we're removing the background.
Oh, interesting.
So we're moving the background while you're flying through here secretly, and then we see the backgrounds are now different. So it's not the scrolling background anymore. This is quite difficult. Go down, up, down.
And so I know there's only so much you can do with flying spaceship battle games, but was Star Wars something you guys referenced a lot when you were making this?
We knew. You mean the arcade game, the original arcade game, or the movie?
The franchise in general.
Obviously, I think we referenced a lot of stuff from all sci-fi movies. I think.
Were there any in particular you guys like pulled a lot from?
No, I think really, primarily, I mean the main thing we probably pulled from is Starblade, from Namco, which is a simpler game, but it had a slightly similar system where you were flying through and shooting at stuff,
Right.
and it's very cinematic, and we tried to make this very cinematic, like scenes like this, which at the time was pretty unheard of. So, we'd had 3D games before, but they didn't really quite have all this kind of presentation, like the initial tunnel sequence and stuff, when you're launching into Cornelia and stuff like that. Yeah,
this is another huge part of what makes this game feel really like top-notch in terms of polish, is that you have those introductions, you have these nice little like kind of cinematic exits to levels.
Yeah.
And then the entire camera movement, the controls you were saying, they're intimately tied in together to create like this very nice feeling and nice looking kind of thing.
And all the speaking characters as well really kind of helped put it all together, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Here we use a lot of interesting techniques on this stage. So our map system was very dynamic, and we could actually create objects at any point. Oh dear, yes, this is quite hard. And triggered by anything as well. And so we had this quite good system for doing this, and it's very linear, kind of made with a scripting language. It wasn't like with a map editor, because if you do it with a map editor, then you can only really place objects where they are going to be. But with this, what we did is we generate objects sometimes closer and sometimes further away as you fly through. So sometimes you'll see something in the distance, and then something will appear in front of you, or you'll fly forward and then things will appear above you and come down and land in front of you and stuff like that.
And so you're thinking entirely of the presentation.
Yeah, it's all about the linear kind of sequence. So it's like a sequence programming rather than a map programming.
Yeah, and it makes it feel, I mean, that adds into the cinematic feeling of this whole thing. And
so we made this stage meant to be very close, you know, it's like very dark, so the stuff's only coming into view close because that's only, we didn't have enough palette colors to fade it in more. I mean, it is fading slightly, but it should, you know, we couldn't make it any darker than that.
Yeah, you couldn't do like full distance fog, but you could kind of simulate it.
Oh, look, there's my animating walker. Look at these guys, little walker. I never got around to fixing his left leg.
It's been 23 years.
Little wobbly left leg there. It was a lot of fun. So we had you know, many hats on basically.
Yeah. And the visuals of this game are kind of like a very unique aesthetic as well. You can only do so much with
like the limited polygons, right? Yeah.
But it's really cool, you know, like this grid line pattern and that very simple but very kind of cosmic outer space.
Yeah, we had a 16 color palette, right? And so they designed a really nice palette, which is this shades of grey with a couple of shades of blue and a couple of shades of red and one flashing color, that red-yellow flashing color. And I think there was like, so the shades of red went from red to like yellow, so it's like red, orange, yellow kind of thing. And it's just a really nice palette for the game, and really defines the entire game actually.
Yeah.
And they change it subtly on different stages. So sometimes, like this stage is a little bit greener, so they tweak the colours a little bit. But they still keep the same basic palette. And that really helped the look. Well, really helped the look. And then Watanabe-san, the guy who was doing the modelling, he just had a very clever sense of how to minimalize the use of polygons, yet still let you see the shape, like those butterfly style enemies and stuff like that. And they're so low in polygons, yet they have very distinctive silhouettes and shapes, like even like these tanks down here. Just very, I mean, there's probably like 10 polygons.
And yeah, you
can recognize the shape. Yeah, exactly. I made this boss. He's a bit tough. I created this scrolling texture thing in the engine, and I wanted to use it somewhere. And I thought, well, let's have a strange spider thing that spits it out of you'll see it in a second. Spits it out of its center. Oh, it's going to come and attack you. So go down or up. Down. Oh, up. Up. Sorry.
That's all right.
They're nasty, those. Just keep shooting. You'll see his second attack is a nasty fire attack, and you'll see in a second. We got very good at making these bosses. We had to make a lot of them, like in only 10 months, and each one had to have all these different stages of games. So we got very good at making logical feeling bosses that feel good, like you feel like you're going through. Oh, here it is. So there's a scrolling texture, which was like a new technology at the time. Yeah, and then I created sprites as it hits the ground to make it look like it was, bouncing off the ground at you. Yeah, watch out. He's kind of tough. Quick. Yeah. Have you got a smart bomb?
I have one more. One more.
There, I throws its legs off. Oh, you see there? See how I've timed it? So I timed the texture scrolling going into the ground, and then the sprites come out, so it actually looks like it's a connected, connected sequence.
Yeah. Right there.
It
feels like it's one thing.
There you go. Little tricks like that. I had a lot of fun with. So it's amazing what you can do with within such limits.
Yeah. You learn all the tricks to communicate whatever you want to try to communicate. Oh no!
Oh no!
So close.
It's like only about 100 polygons on the screen.
And even like that death sequence. Oh no! Was kind of cinematic.
Oh,
like
all your
the
lives
spiraling crash, and then like you hit. Then it looks like it like rotates a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh man, I forgot how hard these old games were.
Yeah, I made them hard back then. That's right, you can still do it.
Yeah.
The one regret that Miyamoto said he had after this game, he really liked it, but the one regret he had was we made each stage a bit too long.
Oh yeah.
And he said, after he said, well, the one thing I would change is just make the stages a bit shorter, maybe have a few more of them. I mean, one problem with the game, of course, it's quite a short game, really. You can play all through like every single stage, probably in an hour and a half. You know, once you're good at it. Because it's a shooting game. It's a game where we're just constantly feeding content to you all the time. So there's only so much content we can make, and there's only so much content that you actually want. So, and most shooting games are pretty short like that. You know? We designed it for replay as much as possible, which is why we added all the secret routes and stuff like that. So you go back and you play from stage 1 again, but this time you try something different and you find some more stuff in it. So that's actually probably why there's so many secret things in it, actually. I think we all realized during development we needed a lot more things hidden in the stage to encourage people to go back and try and play again and get a higher score as well.
Yeah, I was curious when you were talking about the different difficulty levels, were there any kind of metrics you would use to define, like, okay, this is a difficult level, so we're going to build things based on, like, you know, this amount of enemy spawns, or enemies will shoot at you this often? Or did you guys kind of just, like, iterate on stuff and then see how it felt, and then iterate it until it felt hard enough?
Completely iteration-based.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we set up all these macro languages, we actually got the stage designing being done directly by hand by the assistant director, so Yamada-san was doing that. And he would just really create these really intricate things. And what I noticed, a really big difference between making games, say, in England, oh, you did it, and making games in Japan, the really big difference was in England, we kind of find all the cool stuff. This is back in the day, not now probably so much, but back in the day, we find all the cool stuff, we just shove it all at the beginning.
Right.
Because it's all cool. It's just see all the cool stuff, all at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then the games were never really designed to be completed.
Okay.
So you'd play and it would get harder and harder and harder. You get back to the halfway point, you go, oh, this game is just too hard, I'm not playing it anymore. But it was kind of fun and cool. So, and if you look at a lot of the old, like, British-made games from around that time, they're all like that.
Yeah. I'm thinking, what was it? Battletoads, was that early Rare? That was British,
that might be
right?
early Rare. Early Rare stuff was
I
pretty,
never finished it, but there's a lot of cool secrets
a lot
at
of
the
cool
beginning.
stuff, right, at the beginning, yeah. And so one of the things that we noticed, or I really noticed when working on this with Miyamoto's team, is that, yeah, there you go, yeah. So we would find all this cool stuff, and we would be trying to put it into the beginning of the game as early as possible, and the Miyamoto's team would spread it out really nicely. They create like a sequence. We go, well, we've got all these cool things. It's almost like they've got like post-its with like all the cool things written on them, and then you've got like 6 stages, say in one section, like an easy path, and they go, okay, well, we've got this going into spaceships section. Let's make sure let's put that right in the middle because it's kind of cool. We've got asteroids. Let's put those in like the second stage. We've got what else is on that particular lineup? Well, like the scrolling texture for the fire and stuff. Let's put that a bit later on in the sequence, and they spread it all out nicely across the whole game. And at that point, you know, I realized, oh, they're designing the game so it can be completed. Which, until then, like, I'd never played a game that was designed so it could be completed.
And now you have to think of, like, okay, what is like the user experience throughout the whole thing?
The whole thing, yeah. And I realized you have to think a lot about that, and you can't just shove everything at the beginning. And so, and I used that technique in pretty much all the Pixel Junk games. For example, Pixel Junk Shooter is a very good example of that. We did this exact same thing. We had all these really cool features and all these cool things, and we said, okay, we've got this amount of levels. and we spread it all out on a big table, and we just said, okay, let's just put post-it notes on to where we want these things to be introduced to give the player like a really nice sort of up and down kind of experience throughout the game of like, you know, regular parts and then something special, then something regular and then something special. Yeah. Rather than like just shoving it all at the beginning. And it also gave us hints that, you know, oh, we need to add a few more special parts, you know, we don't have quite enough for the volume of the game. And I've just always used that technique now, and I think it's very, very uniquely, very Nintendo-like. Yeah. I think if you look at any like, say Super Mario Galaxy or whatever, it's very much designed in that way. It was time-based, so it was a bunch of scripted commands in a sequence. So the command would have like how much time to wait until it executes, and the command would be place an object at this location relative to the camera, and that's what it was. And then as the camera goes through, it's just placing objects relative to the camera as you move forward through the stage, with a pause. So at any point, if you go and change an earlier part of the stage, of course the whole stage becomes shorter. And so there was a problem with the credits sequence of the game, because for the American version of the game, so the Japanese version of the game we made, and then we had all the credit sequence, and Hirasawa-san, the musician, he had designed the music sequence to match it perfectly. And then we made the American version, and it had like an extra credit in it or something. And because it was the same sequencing system, any little change we made would change the length of the sequence. So we had to go in and like kind of adjust different parts to try and get it to match up again. But that couldn't be helped. It's just part of that sort of linear style of game design. Yeah. But it worked well. So for example, like on these stages, we could just, at any point, we could just trigger objects to appear from down below, and they'd come like these missiles, and they'd just come flying up.
And then come at you.
Yeah, and it just all worked. And then it really does create this sort of dynamic timeline.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, it seems like a lot of your like education on this project was learning a bit about pacing and presentation from Miyamoto.
Yeah, completely, yeah.
And like when you play this game, you think about just kind of how amazingly paced it is and how utterly explosive and kind of over the top and incredibly satisfying the presentation is. Yeah,
and all these like variations and stuff that come in, and it's never boring, right? Like there's just always new stuff being thrown at you, like some new feature, some new thing that you haven't seen before.
And even by today's standards, there's a lot of stuff going on right now.
Yeah, there is a lot of objects flying around and stuff. I think the only problem really is it's just a bit too hard.
It's very hard.
It's just a bit too hard.
It's very, very,
You know, we were just, all of us, even the Japanese guys, were just a little bit too much core gamers. You know, the Namco game I was talking about, Starblade, we would go in the evening down to one of the arcades in Kyoto and just play the hell out of it with the Japanese guys as well. And that game had like 100 yen, so like $1 continue system on it. And you play it, it'd be really hard, and then you die, and then you have to put another 100 yen in to continue. And what we discovered is the fun of the game or the achievement you got from the game was like how little money you could spend to complete it.
Oh, yeah.
And so we got really good at the game, which might explain why this game's so hard. we got too good. We got too good at it.
You mentioned a little bit earlier about just the other Star Fox games after this losing a little bit about their controls and things like that. But I was curious because there was a Star Fox 2 ROM that came out a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah,
I was wondering if there's anything you can say about that.
Well, I mean, I worked on it for 2 years. The only problem, well, I mean, Star Fox 2, I think I played that ROM, but it's not actually the absolute final version. The final version is more of it has more of a rogue-like kind of style of play to it, where every time you play the game, it's a different sequence of events, picked from like a random set of scenarios. Okay. So basically every time you play, you get a different experience, and it's designed to be like a quick, so if you play in easy mode, then clearing the sort of the star map kind of thing would maybe be only 15 minutes or so. You'd have like a couple of dogfights, there'd be something on a planet somewhere, you'd convert your ship to like a walker type thing, like in the recent Star Fox, and walk around and hit switches, and had a bit of a platform element to it. a lot of the experiments we did with the platforming there that didn't go in the game were used later on for Mario 64 and stuff like that, because we were exploring like having rotating sections that you jump between and stuff.
Right.
And suddenly Miyamoto was very interested in trying out all that kind of stuff. And then yeah, so I think that game was a very unique game, and it was a very different direction. Right. Which is primarily Miyamoto-san really pushing the team to do something different. So whenever I've spoken to Miyamoto-san about this game, it's always been this game isn't meant to be just like a rail scrolling kind of 2D style, like a 3D shooter. It's meant to be like a showcase for new kind of technology and different ways of playing in a 3D space kind of thing. Okay. And I think that's why you see in all the Star Fox games like a lot of variation in play. Right. Like all of them. I mean, one of them is almost like an FPS, crystal running around and stuff. So I think that I think there's that desire in Miyamoto to try and always make this a game that's showing different things to do in 3D rather than just like a shoot 'em up. Like
it's just largely about the experiments you can do.
Yeah. So in Star Fox 2, it's more about. Star Fox 2 is more about the experimenting with the strategy side of the game, right. And having like a team and trying to destroy enemies, and then and having this roguelike kind of iteration going on.
Yeah, it's funny you were saying, because like you were just saying that this one you think maybe you made a little bit too hard. Yeah. And then you said so for the next one we made it more roguelike.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of the standard for difficult games.
Yes, yeah. We made it an easy roguelike. It wasn't too hard.
Just like the randomization.
We just made sure that just to give you like every time you play it, you get a different scenario, a different set of things to play. I think we coded. I think I coded about like 120 different scenarios with all the different set of parameters for like when you're on the planets, when you're in dogfights, and there's a whole bunch of bosses as well. There's like a mothership sequence where you kind of go into the mothership, you convert to a walker, and you're like running around in the mothership destroying turrets and stuff, and you end up blowing it up. I mean, they took a lot of the ideas from Star Fox 2, but then kind of bundled it into a more this style of play for the 64 version, which is fine, which works as well, so it's good.
Is that the frog guy right there?
Yeah.
I never noticed him before in my life. Yeah. That's fascinating.
So I think the 64 version is also really good, but I think it was just an interesting vector of change, and I think Miyamoto, after Star Fox 2, he's decided that let's take it back a bit to this style of game, but just explore the all-range stuff a bit more. Right. And of course they reference a lot of movies in that version. So later on, for the 3DS, they wanted to remake it, so I thought, well, I didn't really have any input in the first one, so I might as well put my mark on the remake. We made the remake, and it's actually a really good remake, I think. We redid all the graphics. There's some really nice graphics in the later stages, actually, especially for a 3DS.
Yeah, that one was really well received.
Yeah, it's really good. It still sells now as well. It's quite a few years on. I think it's like 6 years ago. We put a lot of effort into making that really nice. Had a lot of love put into it. Yeah, no, it was great actually. Yeah, because I mean we were their first pick to do it because we'd done Star Fox Command as well on the DS.
You want to try on? You can't do worse than me.
Oh, I mean, like I have no idea how to control it. I don't remember anything. What? Ooh.
Like your primary.
This is so hard. This is Rap Rebel.
It is
so hard.
Yeah, that's the best way to learn. You just jump in on the last level, and then you just learn the game on the fly.
I drew that font, by the way.
The down there where it says shield.
All of that, yeah. Oh. And the only thing I didn't draw was the top left, the R wing, because that was Miyamoto-san.
Okay.
But I was quite busy on the art side as well.
Yeah.
Because in those days you do it all yourself. Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't go like, oh, I need an artist to do this. You just go, oh, no, I'll just draw it.
Yeah.
And put it in. And then if an artist didn't like it, they can redraw it afterwards.
Hard.
So, this was slapped in at the end. This is another thing. We thought, actually, we need to teach the player how to play the game and whether they can do. I think you can swap the up and down, can't you? They let the player choose as well, you know, where they want to have up as up and down down, or the opposite.
They didn't have like a strong opinion like Miyamoto about this is what it should be?
No, they were pretty flexible on that. Yeah, I think the team was like split half and half. It's just kind of showing you how to fly, you know, the formation flying.
Yeah.
So. It was kind of fun little tutorial stage. It really was knocked up in like a couple of days at the end. Just sort of almost finished everything, and we thought, oh, actually, we need to add something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like being a kid and playing these back on the Super Nintendo when you had no access to really any high-end like 3D PCs, and the 64 is still a couple years out.
Well, do the hard stage.
All of this was incredibly impressive.
Yeah, this sequence is really clever, I thought. With the fade as well. So we had, for all these nice like cinematic wipes, at the last moment, we actually had one Japanese programmer on the team.
Okay.
A guy called Yajima. And he was really good at doing these kind of wipes and stuff. And so they just slapped him on the team just to put all these transitions in. Like he was like only on the team for like 3 weeks, just doing all those like this and this and all this, everything, just putting them all in. It was pretty funny. Yes, with the electric guitar. It's a really good track. Yeah, the musician, he quit Nintendo afterwards.
After this game?
Like a few months afterwards, yeah, he was gone after, he wasn't there for Star Fox 2 over IP arguments. Because he was a traditional musician, and he just kind of expected to still own his music. Back in those days, where it's still a bit kind of grey. Right. But he was obviously an employee at Nintendo, and so he wanted to release the soundtrack for this, I think, on maybe vinyl and CD as well, and he actually made it. So it was all made, and it was all orchestrated like by him, and with proper instruments and everything. And I had a tape of it somewhere. I probably have it still somewhere.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
You know, maybe when I'm 80 years old, maybe I'll suddenly discover the tape and sell it for like $1 million or something. But
that shadow is cool.
But he did that, and it was really good. And then he got into an argument with Nintendo about it because he wanted to sell it, and because he put the effort in to do it. He wanted to be treated like a musician on it, rather than like an employee on it. And Nintendo was just like, sorry.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be great though, because the music for this is really good. Like, I did a great job.
It was really good. The remixes are really amazing, like full strings and everything were put in.
I hope to hear that one day.
But he did well out of it because not out of that. He quit Nintendo. It's a nice little side story. He quit Nintendo. He then invented the call melody format.
Oh, really?
For
cell phones?
For cell phones. And patented it worldwide.
So he's doing all right.
And he was like his company was like worth about 100, like back in like, I don't know about now, but like back in around 2000, like worth 100 million or something, you know. Because even all the Nokia phones, everything used his little, it was like a micro format to store the melodies for getting your favorite pop music as your.
Maybe that's because out of his experience with Nintendo, he wanted to make sure.
Like he got his money, but he was very much kind of that business-minded type.
Interesting.
So it wasn't so much a creator. He was very good at doing music, but he's also very much a businessman, and he became like a boss-style businessman. Yeah. The company is called Faith. Faith Incorporated. I think it's one of that. It's still based in Kyoto, I think.
So it's funny you were mentioning that guy got in an argument with Nintendo, because I had recently finally read the Game Over book about Nintendo in the 80s. And if there's one thing I learned from that, it's that you never ever want to get into an argument with Nintendo.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you talked a little bit about working with Miyamoto and some of the other developers, but did you ever have any interaction with Yamauchi or any of the higher ups?
No, I never spoke to Yamauchi. I got on very well with Yokoi Gunpei. So I was in his department for the first. When I was doing X,
he's a legend,
and he was great. He was like, he kind of, I was like 18, and I was I kept on buying these strange Japanese candy, as you do. You like the strange Kit Kats and stuff like that, but all just strange, lots of really strange candy. And I'd be buying that and taking it back, and he goes, "Oh, don't worry, you can expense all that." So he gave me a candy expense account. And so every lunchtime I just go to the local supermarket and just buy the weirdest stuff, like, you know, they used to have candy that was like lettuce flavored and strawberry flavored, like combined in the same candy.
Lettuce and strawberry.
So one half of it would be lettuce and one half would be strawberry, and there'd be like another one with like melon and tomato.
Well, okay.
As a candy, and like all just weird stuff like this, and I'd be just buying all this stuff
and expensing it.
It was a great time. He was a really cool guy. He was very down to earth and very jovial.
Yeah, he invented the grabber hand for Nintendo.
Well, he kind of reinvented Nintendo. Like, if you
he got them into games, right?
Yeah, if you read the history back, he's the guy who basically got them the hit product, you know, the hit products they needed before Mario turned up.
Right.
You know, which obviously was massively, you know, made them even more money. But before that, you know, the Game & Watches, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Was the Game Boy his idea too?
Game Boy, yeah, it was ideas by people in his department.
I see.
Yeah. And which then he kind of, you know, got them to make. And Nintendo were totally against it.
Oh, really?
They're totally against the Game Boy. the other side, you know, the execs, I suppose, apart from Yokoi, were totally against it.
I don't remember this level at all. This is crazy.
Yeah, isn't it cool?
This is really crazy and cool. That's fascinating that creative guy just also taught you how to expense candy on Nintendo's time.
Exactly,
That's a really
I
great
still
story
do that to this day. I'm always expensing my candy. The FX chip was just kind of, for us, it was like just magic, really, because it had such a hardwired feature in it to render, like, you know, each pixel of a polygon in order, kind of like across with stippling as well, with just like this one command, and you could just then loop really fast to just draw these pixels. That we never really had anything like that before then. We didn't really, you know, there were things like a Blizzard chip, which were more like a much more hardwired bit of hardware, but this was just more, that little bit more flexible. So it means that, for example, we had the rotating sprites in there, but we realized that they're a bit slow, so we can only use them on a few things, and we wanted those meteors. And so it just meant we could go in there and just rewrite that whole section of code to do non-rotated stuff and be much faster at doing it. It's just stuff like that. And that level of flexibility and speed just made making the game tons of fun, because you go like, well, you stay on the regular CPU, you know, making the game part, and you go, wow, I need something that has a bit of a boost to it. So you then start programming stuff on the FX chip and adding stuff, really fast stuff, you know, really to kind of boost the graphics in some way.
Right.
And it could be anything from, for example, in Star Fox 2, I had like slopes and stuff, and I put the algorithm for doing the slope detection, which at the time was a bit mathematically intensive for, you know, what people were doing at the time. Right. So I just moved that onto the FX chip just really easily, and it just gave me a massive speed boost. So it was just a lot of fun to use.
That
was a
really
nice change.
Too, yeah.
That was a nice change. Just when you flew through that tunnel. And this is the same. We use, you know, the Super Nintendo technology that gives us offsets on every character. So every 8 pixels, we have like an offset value we can add to the screen, which is why we can only rotate. So if you look, it's only rotating about 15 degrees, the horizon, and that's because of that offset. Okay. So we can only get like a max gradient of like 1 in 8, because every 8 pixels we can have 1 pixel difference. Okay. So, and that's why it only rotates like that. But you can see that being used in games like I think like Metroid, Super Metroid.
Do they do scrolling? Yeah, there's the.
I
think when it's exploding.
Yeah, and they do kind of stuff like this. Yeah. So quite a lot of Super Nintendo games use that in 2D games.
I remember, I think, Contra Alien Wars. There was the top-down sections, but you could rotate those all the way around.
Yeah.
I think, but that was different because you weren't doing like any perspective stuff or.
It's interesting because that, for example, that rotating horizon thing wasn't thought up by us, the programmers. That was thought up by Miyamoto, because he knew the specs of the Super Nintendo really like inside and out. And he said, well, we need a Horizon? And he goes, well, and he kind of planned it all out himself.
Yeah.
And said, oh, we can use this, like, you know, this offsetting thing,
yeah,
vertical offsetting thing, to give us at least, you know, a slight angle change on the horizon, and it worked. So,
yeah.
So,
it was super effective, and
Yeah.
so it's really funny that he knew like what you guys needed to show off just because he knew the hardware.
Yeah, exactly. And he was always. It surprised me how well he knew the hardware. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Well, I think it's about time for us. We didn't.
Game over, man.
We didn't beat the game.
Game over, man.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But this was a ton of really useful information on Star Fox in general, working at Nintendo. Some cool tidbits about Star Fox 2, and you know, expensing candy on Nintendo.
Yeah.
But I mean, is there?
And making millions from you know, phone.
Yeah, and also how to
mobile
do
phone
that.
melodies.
You
Yeah.
just got to patent the next format that comes out in. But I mean, like, I know that must have been like a very significant point in your career working for Nintendo that early on you know, what's become a pretty landmark franchise. Like, it was very significant in the 90s, and it's still incredibly loved today.
Yeah.
You know, is there anything else that you wanted to say about Star Fox or working at Nintendo, or even just working in early 3D games?
Yeah, I think it shows that even with a small team and with just with effort, you can actually do some pretty amazing stuff. And I think for game designers as well, people are looking to make games now, and if they haven't made games before, there's a lot of hints to be taken from that method I talked about, where you look at like the whole game,
Right.
not just the bits you've just made, but like the whole thing. And sometimes you might want to just move this really cool looking thing and just put it right at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Because you need to have that kind of present for the player at the end, and you want to just, you know, give them this full experience, not just like the first 30% or whatever.
Right.
And I think Nintendo are very, very good at doing that.
Right. Not front loading it.
Yeah, one of the best games, like game creating methodologies out there, I think. You know, and I think that's pretty. You can see it in pretty much every game they make.
Yeah.
They always give the player a sense of discovery.
Yeah. Oh, I never realized he tapped his foot if you don't do anything.
Yeah, he
there
does.
for a while.
Yeah.
That's something else I never knew. So. Awesome, cool. Well, thanks
Yeah.
a ton, you guys, for joining us for this.
Yeah,
and for taking
thanks
the
for
time
playing.
out to let us play these old games.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank
and then
you.
we'll see you the next time we shoot Devs Play.